Bam! MC is in the house. What's up, folks? My name is Justin Garcia, also known as Master Chim, and welcome to the Warrior Stream. I'm here every week, Wednesday, noon Eastern Standard Time, taking a topic, a deep dive, and having a good time while doing it. A little bit of housekeeping. If you guys are not receiving my emails, the link is not only in the description below, but you can go to masterchimletter.com and you could sign up. It is not easy to sign into my email list, and there's a reason I do that. With my emails, I believe that quality is more important than quantity. So I make a couple of hurdles just so we don't have the bots and the spammers making their way onto my email list. I will say that, you guys that do read my emails, and feel free to write about this in the description. I could get a little bit more aggressive on those than I tend to be able to get to on social media platforms without paying the consequence for doing so here. But I'm also, always keeping guys updated on what I'm up to, what's available, what I have to offer in terms of products and experiences, events, and etc. So all that being said, you should be on my email list. Today we have we're in a good spot, and we're in a good spot because Trump won. If Kamala won, we would also be in a good spot, but for different reasons, right? So I'm a big proponent of mindset. The reason why I advocate so aggressively for a man training his mindset is I speak from experience. There was a time where my deficiencies, where mindset was concerned, was such a liability that not only was I vulnerable to one interaction being the end of my journey, whether it was getting locked up, killed, or some permutation of those two, but it also prevented me from building up momentum that led me to be able to sort of build a life that I now, to this point, enjoy. Mindset was at the forefront of that. So first off, obviously, I had fun with the thumbnail for today's show, showing Trump and me being there talking about make American crushers again, because that's where my focus is. I was talking to one of my guys in the Mastermind group yesterday, link in the description, and he was sharing that he was of the mindset, and listen, no judgment here. And whenever I say no judgment, it means complete judgment. I just don't want to talk about the judgment with you, right? But he was at the phase in his life, the stage in his life where, and I've been there, where it's like voting is bullshit. I don't vote. What's the point? I'm not supporting it. And it's, like, I get the sentiment. I used to have that sentiment, and it wasn't a paradigm shift or a sort of change of preference that led me away from that. It was really just a maturity. What I had asked him was, do you think if Kamala wins, America will be different than if Trump wins? And I don't think he disagreed with that. I just can't recall if I got a literal answer out of him, because this was bigger than him. I was using him as the sort of backdrop to be able to share this idea, which I'm conveying now. The problem that most people have with voting is it does so little because of the sheer numbers involved in it. But my counter to any criticism of it, because of that seemingly insignificant amount of power, is the absolute insignificant amount of cost it takes to vote. If Kamala had won, America would be different. Whatever. I'd still be a crusher regardless. But if we are not allowed as American citizens to vote, that's also a different America, an America that a lot of the guys that refuse to vote, they don't want to opt for. They don't want to opt in. I think a lot of the people that, are anti-voting, who aren't crazy liberal progressives, they tend to be people who have the sentiment, This is all bullshit. Let's get it over with. As if there is this just I got to use my language carefully. There's going to be some sort of cathartic event that America needs to go through before we're on the other side of this. To which I cannot say that I disagree. Where my contention lies is in the pace at which they're trying to bring it about. There are people who are ready for that magnitude of conflict or event, right? Event. But there are people who are not, but would be. There's a pace. Sometimes, you'll have, and I've used this example before, I don't think I've ever been in a fight where I didn't swing first. Because I swung first does not mean to imply that I'm always trying to initiate fights that weren't going to exist. I would understand when a fight was going to happen and just looked to move first, right? Which there's a difference between those two positions. There are some people who, once they recognize a fight's going to happen, they're going to go. I'm one of those people. There are other people, though, that through their own belief system, they will not initiate in a fight or a conflict until somebody physically engages them. Now, tactically, that is not the ideal protocol. But it's not only about tactics to some people. Understand some people think that there's no reason, to sacrifice one's life. They think nothing's more valuable than another day on planet Earth. Which I think if you've done anything, if you're half worth the shit as a man, you understand that's just not true. Any functional father understands right off the bat, we'd sacrifice ourselves to save one of our kids in a heartbeat. But there are some people who operate under the premise that, what, if I can't live, then I'm not interested, or I'm always going to do the thing that allows me to survive. And the value judgments aside, it's really that's almost another discussion entirely. It's really, is somebody doing what they're saying for the outcome that they're saying what they're doing will generate, right? It's like, okay, a lot of people want to have a conflict, or they're tired of the American system. I don't agree with that premise, by the way, at all. American Constitution, greatest, alliance document in the history of mankind, I would say. But you'll have people who, when it comes to the voting, they just want this thing to pop off. It's every time you participate, you're allowing it to continue. I don't agree with that. But there are people who, if this system is so bad, it needs to get a little worse before they understand, before the light bulb goes off. And if there is going to be an event at any point in the future, we want those people. We want to be on the winning side, right? That is sort of the goal. Maybe it's a premise that only I'm operating under, but this idea that we shouldn't vote, it comes off much more as this sort of contrarian rebellion, I'm counterculture. I'm my own person. And they wind up, a lot of those people who are, and I've spoken about this before, when you are counterculture, then the culture gets to decide who you are, right? Because you're identifying yourself as the antithesis, the opposite, the shadow, I would say, of the culture. I wouldn't subscribe to that individually. I would say, what? I have some obligations, some preferences. I have some interests. And I'm going to pursue them. Some people follow the law, certain laws, because who they are just has them act in a way that's in accordance with the law. Other people follow the law because they're unwilling to pay the consequence for not following the law and getting caught. A functional society has laws in place because it motivates both of those parties to act in a way that the society wants them to act. Point being, the reason why I'm even bringing up that example is my only expectation, the charge or the test that I'm always putting men through, is what you're saying reflected in how you are acting. And is what you're saying and acting producing the outcomes that you cite as the reason for saying that and doing that. If you are consistent across the board, to me, it's really just a preference difference. It's tomato, tomato. It's, vanilla ice cream, chocolate ice cream. And I don't think there's really a lot of value in arguing who's better, when preference is involved at that level. But getting back to, the winner of the presidential election and what that means for Americans, if not the entire world, because I don't think it takes much to realize it certainly influences everybody on the planet. Regardless of who won, you still have to wake up every morning trying to be a crusher. I was on a mastermind call earlier this morning with my inner circle guys, and the point that I made, because we had discussed this for a moment, the point that I made was, the outcome of the election yesterday didn't determine anything differently that I had to do today. For a lot of people, and I would say if your life is designed effectively, you probably don't have to connect with anything concerning politics for another 6 months, a year, 2 years, like whatever local's going on, and like who you are is so much more relevant to the life you're living than who's in office. There are good people doing well when there are bad presidents. There are bad people doing well when there are good presidents. Like how an individual, speaking specifically to men for a moment, how a man designs the life that he has to navigate and the outcomes that it produces. You're going to find it, a tough sell to put the blame on whoever's in office at a federal level. Obviously, there are some changes, right? There's some circumstances are malleable according to the political climate, the Overton window, et cetera, et cetera. But what the fuck does that have to do with what time you're waking up in the morning? What the fuck does that have to do with how effectively you're designing your time from the time you wake up to the time you go to sleep? What the fuck does that have to do with you making sure you're checking in with your kids? You're calling your parents and making sure they're good. You're calling your brothers and sisters and making sure they're good. Working out, moving your body, getting out in nature. Like, what does that have to do with this? Yet when we look at the approaches to life that produce the best benefits, the best outcomes, it's always in those things that I had mentioned. It's never in who's in office. I'm a big believer in having a high energy state, and what do I mean by that? I mean, it's okay to get fired up, right? Some people, they want to be stoic all the time. I think, stoicism has a bunch of tools that are very useful in those circumstances where we find ourselves being as non-stoic as possible, right? When we're about to go big emotionally and some sort of cathartic, destructive, event is about to pop off, it's like, yeah, it might serve us well to sit there and meditate on some stoic practices and strategies. But in general, like, you're going to find me, hanging out with the followers of Nietzsche much more than the followers of Epictetus or, Marcus Aurelius. And it's like, listen, I can understand some of these guys lived at times where it's like you had to fucking be a stoic because shit was crazy, I think, and maybe I'd have a difference of opinion if I lived during those times. But for me, I'm somebody that I enjoys getting excited about natural things. Like I woke up today, right? And I got chickens now, right? I got chickens on my property. So I got to let them out of the coop in the morning. I'm entertained by the fact that these chickens have a way of conducting themselves. And we have a newer chicken, and the other chickens are such assholes to that new one. And I'm always looking at dynamic. I'm entertained by this. Why am I entertained by it? Because there's so much that I'm learning by exposing myself to sort of natural dynamics and relationships that have no middlemen. I remember growing up in New York City. There was damn near zero experiences that you had in the ecosystem of the environment that weren't influenced or directly, a result of some other person's decision. How long the city block was that you lived on, how many lights there were, whose house the lights were in front of. Those were the stoops that we tended to hang out on more, right? Like these little decisions that were made by planners and people of influence that have no connection to our tribes, influencing them so significantly. We have to understand the fragility in our identity that results from those types of environments. Getting out in nature, like literally going into the woods and looking at a tree and inspecting a tree. And I would say in a meditative sense, finding a way to almost talk to a tree. I don't mean it literally. I'm not going fucking crazy. Right? If I am, it's the right kind of crazy. But I'm not out here fucking thinking trees are talking to me. But you understand the point. There's so much energy to be found in just the natural dynamics of our environments. It's the stories we tell ourselves that disconnect us from that. It's when we have more time than our mindsets can manage that we tend to get in trouble. When I was a toddler, right, I have a younger brother. As a toddler, I was notorious for being a handful. Like I was a problem. If you can call 3-year-olds assholes, I'm sure my family would use that to describe me. Not to my mother. To my mother, I'm still perfect. Don't let her know otherwise, right? But to my family, if I had an aunt that was watching me and my brother, it was too much for them. It was just too much for them. Maybe they could handle me, probably not, but they could probably handle my brother. He wasn't as crazy as I was. But when they have a limitation of what they can manage and they're overwhelmed, you'll see that they will become dysfunctional as a result. They've taken on more than they can handle, right? They've bitten off more than they could chew. Whatever other euphemisms you could think of, where that's concerned. Well, when we have relationships and experiences that define who we are to us, that are completely from environments designed by disconnected identities, that's a liability. That's a liability because we don't know if what is incentivized in those situations or the formulas to succeed in those situations are aligned with who we are as an individual and what we consider to be moral, what we consider to be good, what we consider to be success. I've said before, you guys have heard me say, rich people get divorced too. Rich people kill themselves too. Rich people become drug addicts too. And it's easy, to hear that and, just sort of nod your head and understand. But you got to think of the dynamics that are really implied in that. This idea that there's an echo here. Might be my screen. Anyway, this idea that somebody who has a surplus of wealth still has so many of the same problems that we regular folk do. That is worth meditating on. Because sometimes we attribute, the solution to our problems in the outcome of money. If we get money, my marriage will be better. If we get money, my kids will respect me more. If I have more money, my body will be healthier. And it's a little bit of a logical leap, to make some of those connections, yet we make them every day. So what am I advocating for? I'm advocating for you being a crusher. But the metrics associated with being a crusher, having just a part of it, a piece of the pie, be about money. Are you healthy? Are you a dedicated, loyal, friend to your time? Or are you somebody who just treats time like, you got a never ending supply? Sometimes I hold on to things way too long, right? And I'm not full on hoarder status, you know, contrary to what my wife may say every once in a while, because she thinks I might be. But to me, it's like I have an appreciation for stuff. It's not that I'm connected to stuff. It's not that I'm addicted to stuff in a way that I lose who I am. If it were taken from me, as if I'm reliant upon it. But I'll be honest, it's hard for me to look at things and not see the value in them. I think one of the biggest hurdles people have is somebody's asking about my shirt. I'll put it in the comments. Here's the link. It's my latest shirt, by the way. I wear V-necks because I wasn't born with a neck, or as I like to say, I did the work necessary to not have a neck anymore. But there's all sorts of products at that link. I put it in the chat. I should probably put it in the description. I'll get good at this eventually. Trust me. But when I'm looking at individuals who, let's go with the theme of this shirt. It's like, if when you woke up, right, just go with this mental exercise for a minute, because most of my mental exercise is fucking weird, right? You wake up and I'm sitting in a chair right next to you, right? Just go with it. Pretend like this is normal, right? You wake up, you look over, and there I am. And you're like, oh shit, MC, what's up? And I'm like, you ready? And you're like, for what? I'm like, for today. How many of you would say, why? What's going to happen today? To which my reply would be, I don't fucking know. You don't know? Like, what the fuck are you asking me? When you wake up in the morning, do you know what you're supposed to do? This idea of being locked in, this idea of, having a focused period of time to accomplish a task. I've done some shooting, right? I will never say that I am a good shot, right? Even if I was, I probably would say I wasn't. But there is a point where if you are going to focus on engaging a target, simultaneously, there are things that you begin to not focus on. When all we want is the outcome of hitting that target, we could say we're locked in. Most people don't have anything to lock into. So every day they wake up similar to the employee mindset, right? So when I talk about the employee mindset, every day they show up to work going, I just got to do enough to not get fired today. Don't get fired today is the goal. That's the employee mindset. If you're an employee and that's not how you think, congratulations. You don't think like an employee. But that is the employee mindset. Similarly, the person who wakes up going, I just got to make it another day. There is no circumstance in your life where that is the most effective strategy. Now, hear me out. There are going to be times where that is all you can muster. And I get it. But it is still certainly not my position in your life, the viewer, right? The listener, whoever's hearing this. It's not my position to tell you that that's okay. I had a guy a couple of years ago. I've used this example before. I've shared it before. He told me that in order to go to sleep, he needed to smoke weed. I've never smoked weed in my life. Not a fan, right? When he tells me he needs weed to go to sleep, I didn't tell him, well, weed is bad. You shouldn't smoke weed, but because eventually it gets into an identity battle. It becomes more of an existential identity-based threat to him, where he has, well, I'll do what I want, and then we're talking about his right to do what he wants instead of the actual topic at hand. But what I asked him, which threw him off a little bit, was, all right, for how much longer do you have to do that? And that's when I saw, you get the looking back, he's accessing his brain power, right? And he's like, well, I don't fucking know. And he's, I never thought about that. And I know. And that's what happens with people who are in dire situations. They're not focused on what they need to get out of it. They also don't understand when they're supposed to stop doing that. I was on a call with my business group this morning, and one of the things we were talking about were, seasonal strategies for businesses. And there's one guy who is an absolute crusher, and he was talking about in his business, one of the things that he could do is he has, I don't want to give too many specifics, but he has a business that, employs a bunch of workers. And as the weather starts going down, dipping down in temperature, he loses, the baseline level of work he has available to them. So this morning we talked about potential strategy being leveraging or pivoting into decorating houses for the holidays, which there's some money to be made there. And it is a way for him to still monetize, his staff effectively in a way that will cover the nut, so to speak. But it is seasonal. If he would never do this, but to just continue the example, if he were to take that feedback and then open a home lighting decoration business, it would thrive for the next few months, and then it would be crushed because it's seasonal in nature, right? So the reason I'm using that as an example is to sort of illustrate there are things in our lives that we're going through that are seasonal. It's like, this is some stuff we just got to get through. And everything that we need to do right now to get through this, like, we need to be online. We need to be locked in. But we also need to understand that this is limited in its utility. It's limited in its proximity to our mission. If you guys, remember being in school, it's like a month left of school, right? It's one more month and summer break. And you got to go through that month. If you're responsible, you crush the month. But at the end of it, you realize that it's done. And now you do whatever your plan for the summer is, or it happens to be. So there is an idea of there being value in being locked in a mission-based period. When Trump won yesterday, that didn't change anything. It didn't change anything for me in terms of what I have to do today. I guarantee it didn't change anything for you. So then it begs the question, well, what is it that it's not changing? What already exists that does not need to be changed? Some people wake up every day and they go with the flow. Just see what the day brings, and we'll just see. I think that's a lot of bullshit. Let me add some context. I usually get in trouble when I don't add context to those types of statements. One of my biggest, I'm not even going to say criticisms, I will actually defer to the age-old wisdom of Eastern thought and Eastern philosophy. This idea of enlightenment. And I understand I have a suboptimal understanding of the concept. So any students of these topics, don't at me, as they say, right? But this idea of completely going with the flow of the universe, being one with the Tao, a very common phrase or analogy used is, going with the current of the river. It begs the question, if enlightenment or being one with the universe, right? I'll use that. I won't use the term enlightenment because that probably has specific meanings that I'm not even aware of. But being this idea of being one with the universe, going with the flow. Who's the one going with the flow? What if the flow is moving in a direction that is not congruent with who we are? Well, we're just going to go with the current. Well, what if the current is about to pull us toward some rocky rapids where there are jagged rocks sticking through and we're in an inflatable raft? I'm going with the flow, but this flow is about to fucking kill me. So there's some other identity that needs to operate. So what do I mean by this? What's the point of even bringing this up? When you wake up in the morning, part of knowing who you are is knowing what you're supposed to do. And I would say to the extent that you have no idea what you're supposed to do, you have undeveloped the relationship with who you are. You don't even know who you are. Right? One of the ways to really be taken advantage of and not getting ahead in a competitive environment, which a lot of societies tend to be, is when you are dysfunctionally agreeable. Should we go to the restaurant, the Chinese restaurant or the Japanese restaurant? We should go to a Japanese restaurant. Oh, but I prefer the Chinese restaurant. Okay, we can go to the Chinese restaurant. It's like, what the fuck is he even asking you for? If you're just looking for the opportunity to echo to him what he said anyway. Where are you to be found in this? Obviously, there are manipulations that are involved in, those types of handling of that. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the person who just doesn't want the conflict. There's a certain level of conflict that's just par for the course. And, it's standing up to the current to preserve your identity. Everybody should have non-negotiable aspects of who they are. But again, let's bring it back. Let's say that you're a Kamala fan, right? I don't know how the fuck you found my video, but let's just say, for argument's sake, that's who you are. You're like, oh, the first, Indian woman president. I was all about it, because I like to pick my presidents based on, what boxes they could check first. Not whether or not they could do the job. I'm not going to go down right. Pull back from that. But let's say that you were a Kamala supporter. And your girl lost. Your girl took an L. How the fuck does that change what you're supposed to do today? But I guarantee you'll see people who are low state, who are acting like something changed in what it is they're supposed to do to take care of them and themselves. A lot of that low state narrative is going to be fed and amplified by people in media who make money by keeping them addicted to that feedback. They want to be the conduit through which these people build a relationship with the world, build a relationship with their own lives. You want to know how to treat your family? Make sure you watch us tonight. We're going to tell you. Like, you got to have a direct relationship with the powerful sources of energy that are around you. That's your wife, that's your husband, your sons, your daughters, your mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, right? Family, friends, tribe, nature. These are the people that are going to help you paint the backdrop of your success. These are the people that are going to help you move when movement escapes you. I can't tell you how many times in my life where I was borderline dysfunctional and I'd get a check-in from somebody. Hey, what's going on? How you doing? Just checking in at you. What do you do? What's going on? Like, what are you doing with this? I hear you're going through some stuff we hear. What's the plan? And refusing to take the surface level. No, man, I'm good. Everything's good. Yeah. Like, no, motherfucker. I heard this thing happened. Like, what's going on? And you got to have people that you could do that, right? But these are sources of energy that keep us moving. How many people do you run into during the course of the day where you ask them how they're doing, they're asking you how you're doing, and neither one of you really give a fuck? It's just a game that you play. And I'm a fan. I'm certainly an advocate for, civility and manners. And I've said before, manners are the poetry of society. It's good. Now, from my tribalnomics lens, I would say these are alliance building formulas. These are alliance ready identities. If you're somebody that walks around like this, very hard to make new allies. We need to make new allies, or we should be open to allies and the potential synergy that an alliance with them represents, which is why, walking around like this is not the best way to go about things. Why being neutral or being open, but then having a protocol for managing these early introductions, connecting with people in ways that both of you benefit, avoiding deep connection with somebody who really has no value on the other end of a deeper alliance. Like, this is the way we should be acting. But again, back to the fucking point of today's talk. What is any of those larger scale issues? What does any of that have to do with you being a crusher today? So, because that's the thing, right? If you're a crusher today. And then tomorrow, you'll be a crusher tomorrow. Because if you're a crusher, but today you're being a bitch, you're a bitch. Because today is what matters. Some people, obviously, and I've spoken about this already today, I've already spoken about some people's state might be compromised, energy compromised, circumstances compromised. I get it. But what are we locked into then at that point? We're locking into getting back to where we were. Car breaks down, got to get the car fixed. My wife got into a car accident yesterday. Some guy fucking changed lanes, hit her head on. 2 of my kids. They're fine. The car's fucked. What am I supposed to do other than, after making sure my family's good, other than get a fucking car for my wife to drive now? Like, that's the order of operations. Yeah, but what if the guy was high, or he was drunk, or he's senile, or like, am I supposed to worry about that? Listen, one of my family was injured or worse, it'd be a different situation, but that's just not the case, which means it's a reality that doesn't exist. As it stands, the car's fucked. My family's safe. We got to get the car. We got to get a car back up and running. Like, there is a utility, a functional utility, an approach to deal with these situations that have nothing to do with the inner head stories of, oh, why does this always happen? Or why, I can't believe that guy, why is he driving? And like, who the fuck cares? Who cares? That type of mindset, it's the type of mindset that has to add value and utility to these internalized, disconnected thought sessions because they spend so much time there. Let me give you an example of that. Psychologists, social scientists, sociologists, they've done studies that indicate if there is a child molester, there is an incredibly high probability that he, as a child, was molested. Okay. But at no point would any one of us have somebody molest our child and say he couldn't help himself. He was molested as a child. No, I would run my protocol for what I do when somebody molests my child. Like, if I have a protocol for that, that's what gets run. Because those are the circumstances that I'm looking at. But why did he do it? Because what happens is you wind up getting more information than you need, because the information talks you out of the movement. There was the one lady, and I've talked about her before, where she did that presentation, like a TED talk, where the findings of her studies or studies she was citing were that, pedophiles, that is their sexual orientation. They can't change it. They can't control it. And I remember there being a huge uproar. And meanwhile, I didn't understand why everybody was so pissed off at this lady. Because, and I said this to people, probably a little bit more covertly back then, but whatever. I was like, yeah, but what if she's making this presentation, but she's on our side? Let's say that lady is down with everything. She's down with the sickness. Right? It would change our whole take on that talk. Because to me, what she was saying did not discount or discredit, disqualify any of the protocols that I would have for somebody who abused one of my children. It's like, okay, so that's how it happens. All right. Yeah, but they can't help themselves. Okay. Okay. What the fuck am I supposed to do with that information? So there's a clarity that I think we need to build in our approach to our days, our approach to our dilemmas, because the more clear we are on what our relationship with these things are and what our protocols are, the action plans in the face of these things, the more consistently we can wake up and move. The easier it is to lock into a target, to lock into a goal. I can go on and on. Let me see before I get too fired up here. Oh, fine. Let me say what's up to people. Jesse, what's up? Aaron, what's up? Johnny Groove, John Wiley, what's up? Phoenix, Little Goose in the house. Good to see you. Demetrius, what's going on, my man? Jamie, good to see you, brother. Magoo, what up? Corey, good to see you. Monk, what's up, my man? Chad Taylor in the house. Good to see you, brother. Hope all is well. Sean, what's going on? Good to see you. Yarn Saxa, what's up, darling? Big Dog Alpha, what up? Little D. That's fine. Well, technically his son's Little D, but I'll call him Little D. It's my little brother right there. What's up, D? All right, we got somebody, Priya, who is I think a bot either trying to sell me software or sex. I don't know. Block user. I'll leave the comments. You guys can see it and laugh. I think it's on one of the Facebook pages. Jack Gerber, what's up, brother, man? Good to see you. All right, so now that I said what's up to everybody, let's see. Magoo says, the first word I heard was mindset. I know I'm in the right place, right on. Magoo, the other day, Magoo's a student at my school in the Bronx, and the other day in front of the kids, I was asking him to explain, his experience competing. And he's had something like, because now they document all these things. It wasn't like that when I was competing, but he's had like close to 200 matches and it's like won over like 100 matches. And all that, he just won his first gi division. And I'm explaining to, I'm using, the power of his experience to help, the younger students that are in the room, my sons included. And I'm like, when you tell yourself, I'm going to train, I'm going to be as good as I can be, and I'm constantly going to test myself, the outcome of the event pales in comparison value-wise to the outcome of your efforts, to the outcome of your compliance to your plan. It's like you wake up every day, it sounds cliche and corny, but the one mission is to do your best. It's to do your best. The reason that becomes the mission is because embedded in that is an understanding that we can't control every outcome. I've had fighters who have lost fights, but fought like they were going to Valhalla, and I couldn't have been prouder. I've had other fighters who have won fights, but fought as cowardly as one could fight and still win. And I had to almost be held back from the fucking craziness that I wanted to unleash on them, backstage after the fight. Oh, but I won. You fought like a cunt. Like, what the fuck does winning have to do with it? And that's the mindset that I champion. That's the approach that I champion, because the other things will resolve themselves. People get disconnected. I'll use an analogy that I'm making in my head right now. I think it's a valid one. You'll have people that will, at the MMA world, you'll have people that will take on an MMA student. And as soon as they realize that that person is not getting to the highest levels of competition, consider that person a bad investment. Somebody who does that and has that filter for their students is somebody whose identity is connected to having people compete and win at the highest level. There is nothing inherently wrong with that. There is a preference where that's concerned. I've never been that guy. I don't want to hang out with cunts all day. I don't want to have somebody train with me and be a coward. Like, the good guys are going to be good. The guys that have every attribute in the wrong direction when it comes to competition, it's not that they can't be built to win. It's usually the entrance ramp for them and where they started to get onto the highway of high-level success is just too long a ramp for them to want to navigate. I've seen so many people who they've, over the years, MC, you think, you can get him into the UFC? Absolutely. But why don't you then? Well, I could have, but you would have had to bring him to me when he was 4. Like, because there are some changes that could be made that the guy just doesn't have time for. He just doesn't have time for. I wanted to be in the UFC. I auditioned for the show. You guys know this. When did I stop even wanting to fight MMA? When my wife got pregnant. It's like, I gave it one last hurrah because the UFC show, the TV show, I auditioned for. And I think my wife was pregnant at the time. But even then, it was like, listen, if I get into the UFC through this show, not only would I be guaranteed more money, not only would I be guaranteed fights, but I'd also now have the UFC veteran thing. Now that's less of a value, but back then it was pretty, valuable to say that you were in the UFC. It still is now, but you could understand, numbers change things. But when I didn't make the show, it was like, all right, I'm done with competing in MMA. I'm going to focus on the business. I did that. And then the next season 7, if you guys remember, it's when the contestants had to fight to get into the house. I was offered a spot in the first episode. Had I won the fight, I would be in the house and I'd be there for the season, but I was offered a spot. And I turned it down because at that point, 6 months, 9 months later, whatever the timeline was, I was already locked in to providing for my family with the school. And that's how focused I was. It didn't mean anything to me, that value. I would have done anything prior to that to get into the UFC. But once I make that decision, that's it. When we're looking at, what your approach is to your life and what it is that you're doing, it's all mindset. It starts with mindset, right? Mindset or the mind settings. I got that from Barbara Oakley, right? Learning how to learn. Google it. Fucking free course. She's awesome. Everybody should take that course. But after the mindset that is a product of your mind settings, there's movement. That's the other part of that. No matter what happens, the follow-up is always, so what are you going to do? Oh, man, I'm going through this. Oh, yeah, I get it. Yeah, that's terrible. So what are you going to do? That's always the final approach. It's like, okay, because that prevents you from being stuck in your head. And that's where the spirals are. You could damn near get to the point where you spend so much time in your head, you start thinking to yourself, life ain't worth living. That's how delusional one could become when he's stuck in his head. Johnny Groove says men fucked up by being tolerant of things they disagreed with. It's true. It is true. I wrote an article, I don't know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, whenever it was. It was called the What's the Big Deal philosophy. And in that article, I articulated all of the vulnerabilities of somebody whose approach to conflict is to minimize the significance of his side of it. You know, guy wants to take your wallet. What's the big deal? Just give him the wallet. Guy wants to rape your wife. Yeah, well, right. So let's fast forward there. Let's fast forward where you have to say no to somebody. Let's find out what your process is there. Because in modern society, right, symptom of surplus, we can afford to have this what's the big deal philosophy because of how much surplus is there. You can't make any money, it's all right. Somebody will give you the money that they made. And it's a fucked up system that once you opt in, people lose their identity. They lose their souls. When you got a family from Mexico or one of these countries that sneaks in under the border and they're here getting every little bit of social service and free this and free that they are, the one motherfucker I ain't mad at is that motherfucker. If this country is stupid enough to give him its own taxpayers' money, how the fuck do I fault him? That's where we need to focus. This is accountability. But having the what's the big deal philosophy has never done fuck all for anybody, right? You guys asked for the link for the shirt. There it is. Monk says, we're going to need more than 4 years to fix the country. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I would say however many years it takes to fix the country, it's going to be even more years to fix its men. There's a cost in comfort. And not everybody wants to be aware of that cost. Everybody wants to pay it, by the way, but they're not aware of what they're paying. Thanks, Chad, for that. A neckectomy? Oh, that's what I was right. I just put that up to see if I could pronounce it, Chad. Yeah, necks are overrated. I tell people, if I wanted to look at you, I'll face you, motherfucker. Magoo says NYC was calmer than usual this morning. There are a lot of call outs at my job this morning. Oh, that's hilarious. But I also love that you're there to see that other people are calling out because you got shit to do. Jamie shares, what's up, Jamie says, stoicism is great, right, to the point that you're allowing people to walk all over you in the name of keeping a stiff upper lip. That's right. That's right. That is right. In the UFC, I don't know if it was this past weekend or the weekend prior, there was one of these crazy fucking Dagestani Muslim fighter maniacs. It's fucking good. He's a guy that looks like one of his eyes is like from another head. It's almost like you go to a doll factory and it's like it's a refurbished doll where they took an eye from a different doll and put it in just so they could sell the doll with two eyes. But he had one of the most impressive creative knockouts I've ever seen. And it was a double back fist. And it's where he's in position and he threw a back fist one way. The guy blocked it. And then he came back and threw it the other way. Right? So double back fist, the second one knocked the dude out. Incredible. It looked like a special move on a video game. To me, that's the only version of turning the other cheek that I'll subscribe to. There's a point to that whole thing. Big Fred, it's one of my crushes right there. All right. Keto Thor in the house. What's up, brother, man? Good to see you. Haven't seen you in a bit. That's right. Shout out for the algorithm. Old school right there. Every once in a while, for those of you that aren't in the know, I used to have these live shows similar to this. And every once in a while, I'd be like, all right, guys, make sure you press the like and comments and everything so the algorithm thinks I'm a nice guy or whatever the fuck I said back then. Willie, what's up? 12 pack. Good to see you. Right on. All right, guys, let's end it there. The link for this is in the chat. Once I get off, I'll put it in the description. I don't know how to do that right now while I'm on the fucking thing live. I'll figure it out. But the Locked In shirt is available for purchase. You know, support me, support the content, all the other stuff that all the other guys say more eloquently than me. Pretend that I just said that too. All right, guys, I appreciate you all. I'll see you guys next week as usual. And as always, brothers and sisters, pressure to power.